Okay? Now, how do we journalize this? We talked about deciding manufacturing overhead. Let's say after a whole year, assuming we have 100 orders, altogether we were able to assign $67,600 to work in process, assuming after a whole year. So what does this mean? This means that earlier, remember, materials, we assigned it to work in process. Direct labor, we assigned it to work in process. Now this indirect category, we also need to assign a portion of it to work in process because these are the supporting costs as well. We're just taking care of it one at a time. And now it's the third category's chance to assign it to work in process. Okay? So we assign a portion based on the predetermined rate, remember, that we calculate in the beginning of the period. So as orders happen, we assign a portion to work in process, we assign a portion to indirect process, and the journal entries to assign it will be reducing manufacturing overhead, increasing work in process. So just like how we assign materials to work in process, we reduce the materials by $355,000, we add it to work in process, transfer it over. So here we're transferring over manufacturing overhead, the indirect cost, into work in process by reducing this category, increasing work in process. So it represents that these are the costs being processed, halfway done, almost getting there to finished goods. Increase to work in process. Okay, so work in process is an asset account. It represents all the assets, the costs of the production line that are not yet finished goods in the middle of the process. We're allocating them to the jobs, yes. Now this slide is showing a summary dollar amount, but as job happens, usually, for example, the $80 that we just showed on the job cost record, we will have a separate entry that says work in process 80, manufacturing overhead 80. So as job happens, we will journalize this entry. Transfer the cost from manufacturing overhead into work in process. Okay, now you will see the differences between the red highlighted number and the green highlighted number. So who wants to try to guess why is there a difference there? So this is a summary information. When it comes to year end, if we just look at this manufacturing overhead account, since this is year end, we actually know what are the costs that incurred. So we list them out line by line, right? But then the right-hand side, the green side, is a summary of all the indirect costs that we have been assigning to different jobs as time goes by. So when it reaches year end, based on the predetermined rate, and then we multiply by whatever machine hours actually incurred, altogether we assigned this dollar amount to the jobs. But the actual amount that incurred in this year is $73,000. So the difference is the part that, that's okay. So the difference is basically is we misallocated a portion because remember we just estimated a rough rate in the beginning of the year. Expect that would be very close to the actual overhead rate. Okay, so when it comes to year end, we need to do some adjustments based on the differences. Very likely there will be differences because usually expectation, the estimated rate, will not be exactly the same as what actually happens. Right? It will be close, but probably missing a few $1,000s, a few $100s. So this case here, this means that for each and every job that happens, we misallocated a portion of the cost. So we underallocated a total of $5,400 here. Since the actual cost is 73, higher than the part that we allocated to each jobs. So later on we'll talk about how to do adjustments on underallocation and also overallocation. So overallocation, just think of these two numbers flipped over. If we have the actual cost incurred that worth $67,000 and we actually assigned $73,000, that would be a case of overallocation. Exactly. We'll be transferring that to cost of goods sold, but we'll talk about this a little bit later because that's the last process. Okay? So here you just have to know that there may be a difference between the costs that you actually assign to different jobs and at the year end when we realize the actual cost that incurred. Most likely there will be a slight difference between the two. So at year end we'll be transferring the cost, doing an adjusting entry. So if the part that we assign is too less, it's called underallocated. If we assign too much to each jobs at year end, we figure that we assign too much is higher than the actual cost. It's called overallocated. We have to adjust both situations at year end. Okay, let's